All good. I'll send the new link.
Come on, man. Like there's people from outside of England, so people that know what that's been.
Everyone. Thanks, Aflaq. Somebody's at the Weetabix. I bet you didn't expect me to be standing here a year later, but here I am. It's been a challenging 1 year, I think. But I think one of the things I want to bring to your attention is God says, "O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even though it can be against yourselves or your parents or your kin, be they rich or poor, Allah is the best protector to both." It's really interesting because I use this a lot around the work that I do, particularly around the social justice element of what we do and what we stand for here as Islamic Relief. Just a very, very warm welcome to all of you. I believe Najah has said that there's 3 other meetings happening at the same time, 2 DFID meetings at HAD, 1 DFID meeting at HAD, some training at HAD, and there's 2 other meetings that have ended up being in the same time and in the same space. So I know each one of you are very busy, so thank you for taking the time out to come here and meet with us today. I just want to thank all the teams in comms, particularly who have helped put this together and who have, and IPD, PQ, Najah, Rajah, and somebody, yeah, who have come together to put this together. It was, I think it's better than last year, and we're hoping that it will be better, even better next year, inshallah, when we start earlier. And one of the things I wanted to say today was it doesn't take a genius to understand why faith matters, particularly around gender-based violence. Religion matters so much more and more in the context of today's world, be it international development, foreign policy, human rights, humanitarian relief, or the range of lived realities that we're living with at the moment. A Pew research was carried out, and it informed us of a very, very basic fact, to which is basic to the rest of us, but to the Western world. What it says is 8 out of 10 people profess to a religion. In other words, religion matters in the lives of 8 out of 10 people. And yet it is remarkable when I go to conferences, whether it's in Europe or Asia or wherever, religion seems to be the thing that takes the back space. And for so long, we as an international community and as an international organization have come to face with that very reality of religion taking that back space. So we've assumed, well, people have assumed and governments have assumed by modernization, by better living standards, higher GDP, we assumed that religion would completely fade away. And that has been one of the theories. But clearly it hasn't. And clearly it does matter to the rest of the world. Clearly it does matter to the 8 out of 10 people. One of the things that we want to share today, and this is one of the reasons why we talk about gender-based violence, is, however, in all this, we are still very much adherents of religious messaging and its dynamics. And we're hoping that this session today, inshallah, will bring about some kind of challenging to those myths that we're adhering to. So without further ado, why this campaign matters. This campaign matters to the lives of lots of people around the world. We've all seen the statistics. We've all heard the harrowing cases of women, girls, men, young boys who go through gender-based violence. And I have a case study to share with you later. But this campaign matters, and it matters to us at Islamic Relief because that's one of the 4 things that we have within our global policy up until 2021. And by 2021, inshallah, we will shape that to be something greater, hopefully. So the principle of what we're doing today is about speaking about, not about the authority of God, because that is unlimited and that cannot be defined. Rather, it's about the authority that a human being exercises over one another. Defining ourselves, it is about the very essence of dignity that we're talking about. But respect and blind obedience are not synonymous in what we're doing, and the authoritative and authoritarianism are not the same. So what we're talking about today, first and foremost, is the worth of that dignity of every human being that we talk about, and it must be demonstrated in the work that we're sharing today, and which is why we speak to you today on this particular issue. And a brief overview of today is a moment of reflection to honor victims and survivors. We will have a minute's silence. We were going to have balloons, but we decided not to have balloons in the end. There's a placard campaign, and there's food right at the end. So video, what do I do? Before we do that, we're going to play a short video. Can you just show me how to do the video?
That one.
Yep.
Women worldwide witness sexual violence in their lives.
That is for 1 billion people.
That would be anyone of us.
Islam teaches society to honor women.
قال الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام
I've got the technical expert here.
We have to visualize.
Visualize it. But just to let you know, this video was created. Very late, and what we did was that Islamic Relief UK had its own video on Honor Her, and what we wanted to get was the voices of people from the field. So these are not actors; these are all staff at Islamic Relief Bangladesh, Islamic Relief, I believe. I'm not sure which one, but basically they're not actors. They're staff from Islamic Relief. Sorry, these technical issues I have no control over. Where's Is it on? Is it that duplicate one? Why does it keep changing? Oh.
physical or sexual violence in their lives.
That is for 1 billion people.
That could be anyone of us.
Islam teaches society to honor women.
قال الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام أكمل المؤمنين إيمانا أحسنهم خلقا وخياركم خياركم لنسائهم خلقا.
There is no honor in this.
There is no honor in this.
Or in this.
Honor this. Their honor is to respect women. Enough is enough. Hands up. Step back. We are not allowed anymore.
We are standing up for women's rights.
Dexterity, dignity, and freedom. We are honoring women the way our Creator commanded.
I will honor her.
I'm honoring her. I will honor her. So am I. Will you? You can change this. Let's to honor her.
Join Islamic Relief now and help in violence against women and girls worldwide.
Honor her now.
As you can tell, I mean, I think for me particularly, I like it when everybody gets together and it's not just a campaign as a secretariat dictating to everybody else, this is how we should do it. I want everybody to, particularly in Islamic Relief, particularly on an issue like this, participation is real and participation should be everybody's, I guess, what was I going to say? It should be everybody's kind of thing that we do within Islamic Relief. Particularly around when it comes to making videos, what we tend to do is make videos to the Western audience, but we never involve the Global South in the work that we do. So this was a kind of way of challenging that narrative and saying that actually we can involve others when it comes to video making. Wasim, you're on next, so inshallah. Wasim would like to say a few words from the IPD department, particularly around the campaigns that we're working on around gender-based violence.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you have to put this on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Wasim, just go.
Let's go. You wanna, because I like Rostam, you know that.
You like what? Oh, you okay.
Standing.
Push me
I'm
out
only
the way.
joking. Yeah, I'm only joking.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sister Shine. Bismillah ar-Rahman, alhamdulillah, salatu wasalam, Rasulullah. Thank you so much for coming in. And I think one thing I would like to say, to have my own reflection, because I'm not kind of a person that really believe in some stats, but looking around, because we have families, we come from certain countries, we have certain backgrounds. So yesterday, my colleague Yusra told me that, tomorrow you are, Brother Wasim, having a short say and conversation on this topic, and do you need some stats? I said to her, and she's sitting here, I don't need it, because I think it tells me this topic is so sweet. It's a pandemic. It's everywhere. So it's not that you need to open World Bank sites or UN Women or Oxfam or ODI, but it's there. It's just that we need to open our eyes, ears, and reflect on it. That what's happening around us, and what our faith as Islamic faith was organization. And mashallah, you put the ayah, nice ayah there, and the sunnah we heard from a sister is there. It's just that like we are not opening our eyes and we are not reflecting on it. I was in Pakistan to visit my parents in summer, and one day I woke up. In afternoon, it's hot weather, you get some nap, sleep. And I saw a woman sitting in the living room with my mom, and she was crying. Obviously, I didn't ask my mom why she's crying. And when she left, and my mom told me that, I was outside for a little stroll, and I saw this woman sitting on the roadside and crying, and I brought her home. And your dad was saying that probably, like she's spying, and like she can come in the night and with her gang and do some stealing and something. But I told your dad that no, I know this woman, and because she gets beaten up by her husband every day. And not only that, her mother-in-law literally drag her from her hair. That's what my mom told me. And like you think about it, you read newspaper. When I was in Pakistan, you hear everywhere in a newspaper. Then you ask yourself a question. Why is it so? Don't they have daughters? Don't they know about the status of women, status of a daughter, status of a wife, status of a sister, status of a mother? We all know that, but we don't reflect. We just do it. It's a social norm, I believe, because it's a thing. I think one thing they say, honor. It's an honor. If you beat your wife or mother-in-law is doing it, it's an honor. No, it's not. It's a shameful thing. And we must realize this. We must spread this message. Because women, I have a mother. I love my mother so much. My daughter, she'll be mother in coming years, inshallah. So think about it, that what we are doing, there is a maqam, there is a place under the feet of your mother, they say. If you are looking for Jannat, the best place, look under the feet of your mom. So why we're not doing it? While I stand here as a program director, I say, okay, it's part of my, it's not part of my job. It is part of, it's my life. It's my iman, what I believe in. When they say 1 out of 3 women are somehow in their lifetime experience gender-based violence or violence against women and girls, shameful. And these stats tell us that it's happening everywhere. 1 in every 3 women. These are the stats, proven stats, and quoted in various research and articles. And I was reading a newspaper, I think this weekend, when they were talking about, I think UN Women, when they were launching this activism, 16 days of activism, and they were talking about is that, a staggering figure, 200 million women, I haven't verified this, FGMC, 200 million women, and I was not expecting 200 million. I think this is not something that we should be doing 16 days, this we should be doing day in and day out. As a humanitarian worker, as people who feel for this. And if we don't do activities like this, we will never be able to. I wasn't being able to know about this 200 million women figure went through FGMC. Staggering figure. And I think what's happening now, when in a setting of a family, a father is beating children's mom, when they grow up children, they start thinking this is a social norm. And this cycle continues. And we feel this is honor. We feel that, when you reject in front of your mom, and this is sorry to say, this is an Asian culture, I don't know others, like if you marry and in front of your mom, if you really dictate to your wife, then you are the good husband or you're a good son. No, not at all. It's a shameful thing. Because you must think at that time, you have your own daughter, you have your own sister. And I think this is the best lens for us, for people out there. And we, as a third sector organization, as NGO, as Islamic faith-based NGO, we need to spread this word. We need to really reach out, and I like it, we need to reach out to I think the violence is here as well. I was reading last year that even in West, it's not that it's only in South or only in East. It's West and North, everywhere. It's global pandemic. I think the nature is different, but it's there. Even in this country as well, where we live. I have seen myself, a family 2 doors away, they were fighting always domestic violence, police car come in and you can tell. And children are playing in this cold weather in the night outside in garden. Something wrong there. You won't let your children play 8 o'clock in garden, no. As young as 5, 6, 4, 3. Because both are fighting. They're not taking care of their children. So, my dear brothers and sisters, I'm really happy that we have started this, and inshallah I think it will get more and more traction and success within Islamic family. But I think more importantly, I was asking Sister Najah what we can do. I think inshallah as a Director International Program, I have full commitment that we need to have more and more dedicated program for gender-based violence. And I believe in this, that not only just influencing awareness raising campaign would change the situation. I was in a debate last week with colleagues from Oxfam and about influencing and advocacy program directors from 2-3 different organizations. I said, it's fine, campaign and raising awareness. But if you think that will solve the problem, no. You need to hit at the roots of the problem. And this is the changing social norms. And that takes years. Culture, social norms. People who think that, what we are doing today is the best practice. And they continue doing it. And the second thing I believe in, education. I think girls' education is something that we must, as an organization, we recently did a study on education, a piece of research, what we have done in the history of Islamic relief, and what is our unique niche going forward. And I'm very happy with the report that has come out. Inshallah, that will help us to strategize. And I'm the strong believer that we need to pay attention and focus on girls' education. Because I think girls' education can turn around some of these social norms that are unfortunately there for centuries, not for years. So I really would like to thank the team who put this together, Sister Shaheen, Sister Najah, and all the colleagues who work from ERA and IPD and country offices. Please continue this great work, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
It's this one. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Najah, and I'm the Gender Inclusion and Protection Advisor for Islamic Relief. I work with Affan in programs quality, and for the ones who don't see my face very often, I'm based in London. Thank you for being with us today, and I'm here mainly to shed the light on what is gender-based violence programming. And thank you for the introduction. So now we know it's happening, it's everywhere. What should we do,
as a humanitarian organization, especially that we work in a very challenging context. We work in humanitarian crises, in natural disasters, in conflict, and even in the development settings. So I'm sure that we need to put our programming hat on when we raise that question again and again. What is our role? What should we do about it? I hope this works. If this works, it shows that we have a role. If it doesn't work, it means we just go home. Okay, I need to slide it then. So what is gender-based violence? I'm sure you're all aware of the definition: any harmful act done based on your gender identity, if you're a male or a female. And it is important to shed the light that gender-based violence and violence against women and girls sometimes are used interchangeably. But the term gender-based violence is bigger. It's against or committed by males and females at the same level. But when we identify some of the gender-based violence examples that were mentioned, such as early marriage, FGM, honor killing, name it, we need to deal with it as a problem. I have here programming people, and I'm sure that they're aware of what we call a problem tree. And so is the case with gender-based violence. It's a problem. It has root causes. It doesn't happen all of a sudden. There are root causes. And Wasim have mentioned some of the entrenched causes of gender-based violence, which is the unbalanced power relationships. And those root causes leads to this ugly tree, which is the gender-based violence tree. And from it, there are leaves, the consequences, what happens not just to the individual, but to the family, the community, and the whole society, and what are the contributing factors for this tree to grow. This is how we put our programming hat on, to think of how can we deal with this problem of gender-based violence. And as I mentioned, the two terms, gender-based violence and violence against women and girls, will be used interchangeably, especially during the 16 days of activism. But I do reiterate the fact that it's not just violence against women and girls. It's not just a women's issue. It's a social issue. It's happening everywhere, and it is underreported. And maybe that's why some of the cases that targets men and boys are stigmatized and are less reported. So we always come back to the same figure, that 1 in every 3 women. Of course, women are proportionately much more in numbers of survivors that are reported, but overall, any gender-based violence case is less reported than any other crime. So what should we do? Any ideas? We campaign. We just go out, campaign and campaign. That's one thing, but that's not everything we can do. When we speak about gender-based violence, we go back to that tree and think of the root causes and think of the consequences. We need to think of responding, at least as a humanitarian organization. We are committed to that. We have a responsibility to respond to cases. So when someone comes up to you, what should you do? At the minimum, you should be able to refer that case to a specialized organization that can provide health services, legal services, safe housing. You should be able to at least provide that piece of information. And as country officers, we should be able to build those referral pathways. To prevent gender-based violence is our ultimate goal, but as Wasim mentioned, it takes years and years. It's all about the root causes of gender-based violence, but it should always be at the back of our mind when we design any gender-based violence programs. In Islamic Relief, we abide by international guidelines and checklists. There are plenty of them out there in the sector, but at the minimum, we need to think of a survival approach. What should we do to those survivors? There are stand-alone gender-based violence programs, and there are mainstreaming approach for the gender-based violence programs. And this is what we've been doing in Islamic Relief so far. So if I think of some of the examples of standalone programs that we've done, there is one in Iraq, currently ongoing, where we provide or we support survivors to have safe housing. There's also a program in Ethiopia where we think of providing loans or some microfinance support for survivors that can support them in the long run or could prevent gender-based violence from happening. We have the Channels of Hope gender methodology, where we build communities of practice, whether they're faith leaders, community leaders, women. It's all a community-led initiative where participants actually provide that safe network for community members to prevent gender-based violence. And those are some of the programs that we've been thinking of. And it's mainly as a mainstream organization. We feel that mainstreaming gender-based violence is a cross-cutting issue in our humanitarian assistance programs. As programs quality, we felt, okay, we can think of protection. Protection is one of the, gender-based violence is one of the protection risks. So, and we speak about child protection at the same time, gender-based violence, the two issues are cross-cutting. We had a program in 2016 where we integrated both gender-based violence and child protection in our humanitarian assistance in Mali, Pakistan, and Niger. And this integration process was within our humanitarian programs to build communities where there are actually communities of practice that can spread the word against gender-based violence, and from that program we felt, okay, protection is important, but we are leaving a lot of people behind. Then let's think of inclusive and protective programming, where we include age and disability. So the language that we speak now is more inclusive. It's about all men, women, boys, and girls with different ages and abilities. And we had a program in 2017 in 6 countries, again, to mainstream gender-based violence as a cross-cutting issue in our humanitarian assistance programs. And then we felt accountability. We have ihsan. It's not just about inclusion and protection. It's also about accountability towards those affected communities, as well as our organization and the other stakeholders that we represent. So in the time being, we are piloting a program, inclusive protective programming in 8 countries. And in this approach, we are thinking, okay, we might need people in country offices who can adopt this methodology, who can spread the word, who can make sure that we collect at least sex, age, and disability data. We're doing analysis to understand what are the needs of those communities. Are we responding to those needs? Are we adapting our assistance based on the needs of those communities? One of the examples that we got now from Syria when we piloted this program, we have a health center in Syria, and our staff there recognized that not a lot of women would come because there is no space for breastfeeding. Because of the participative approach that they've used, now they have a small room for breastfeeding, and more women are coming to approach our services that we provide. So it's not just about building a school or having a health center. It's about thinking of the quality of that service that we provide. It's mainly about leaving no one behind and do no harm. And do no harm. It's not just about providing that service, but we don't want to create conflict and problems in the community that we are serving. At the end of the day, some microfinance programs can cause divorce in those communities. We do want to challenge the stereotypes and the social problems that exist in those communities, but we want to make sure that we don't cause more harm through our programs. Therefore, analysis is essential. I'm not going to read the story, but collecting learning from our programs is important. How do we know if this approach works? Do we decide, or through monitoring and evaluation and learning, and use that learning to new projects, duplicate that across Islamic Relief's family? This is a simple case study from Mali, 3 boys, orphans. Because of our chat groups, community-led programs, they knew about those boys. They referred them to a rehabilitation center, and they were able to reintegrate in the community. It's a very simple thing to do, but if our own staff are not aware of the existence of those services, then should we actually blame them, or we should do our homework and do some of the coordination and referral pathways, and for every program at least. At the end, I would just like to remind myself and remind you all that vulnerability is layered. Not all women are vulnerable. Not all children are vulnerable. It's always intersectional. There are different identities that layers up that vulnerability, and I'm sure Iman, when she speaks up later, people who are on the move are vulnerable as well. Yesterday when we had that session, we spoke about people who are affected by HIV. That's another layer of vulnerability. And the idea of vulnerability is also dynamic and relative. It's not static throughout. And when we think about GBV programming, we have to think of engaging men and boys. Thank you, Wasim, for mentioning girls' education. Important, definitely. It's going to change a lot of things that we see in our communities, but we have to engage boys and men as well. Otherwise, we're going to have our little island, and we live alone, and it's not going to work. We have to integrate the other half of the society. And finally, as Islamic Relief, a lot of our approaches are faith-inspired, but we live in a global world. Some of those definitions are global, statistics are universal, but we need to think and look back at our own faith and try to use what we already have. We have a rich heritage to fight gender-based violence. Thank you very much.
Oh, am I going to do that? Oh. Okay, back to me again. So I had this case study. The case study was a woman that came to me with a solemn face. She's just full of emotion. And she said that her husband had struck her. She suffered no pain, she said. And she said that the imam in the mosque had advised her that her husband is her guardian, and that if she is seeking divorce, that is not a sufficient cause, because it is an opportunity to perfect her humility. It is reported that Ali radiallahu anh had said, in Islam, if a man had struck his wife, that the shame of the act would plague him and his descendants for many years to come. It's really important to understand where we are with gender-based violence. And thank you, Najah, for all that you said. But one thing I do plead to our directors and our CEO in Islamic Relief, being in advocacy, is for gender financing, for more programming and more finance to gender-based violence projects. Whilst we do a lot of work, a lot of this work can be evidenced, a lot of it can be researched. However, I think we need to put much more into the gender work that we do, and actually financially contribute to it to more, because this time next year we want to be able to stay here and say we're not just working in 8 countries, we're working in 40 different countries. And this does not mean to say that we negate the fact that the Western world or the global North is away from that statistic, because gender-based violence on the doorstep here is happening. Just recently I had to, so outside of Islamic Relief, there's a lot of rescue work that we do. There's a group of us that do rescuing. And just recently I had to rescue a young boy who had the mental ability of an 8-year-old who was being sent to Pakistan to get married, and we had to rescue him from Birmingham Airport. And he had come to one of the classes that we put on in one of the madrasas, and it was one of the young lads who was his best friend, a 14-year-old, that said, "Miss, I got your phone number from somewhere and I've called you to tell you that Umar his mom's taking him to Pakistan to get him married." It is cases like that happen every single day. We rescued another woman from her house. She was living with 19 other people in Leicester. But the uncle of the brother of the husband was abusing the young children, all under the age of 12. You know, these things are on our doorsteps, and as Wasim mentioned, you know, it's not just in Pakistan, it's actually within these spheres. So I want to say, from an advocacy perspective, and I don't know if Wasim has heard about the fact that we want more funding into gender work. And one of the other things I do want to also explain is that when you're talking about safeguarding, when you're talking about all the other issues that exist, gender justice is a prerequisite. You have to know about gender before you understand the issues around safeguarding. You have to know about gender to understand gender-based violence. You have to understand all the intersectional layers of gender before you tackle the issues around gender. So for me, from the advocacy perspective, we're setting up this gender justice declaration. And this is a declaration and a commitment as Muslims and as humanity, and particularly as an organization, to achieving gender justice. Inspired by the Islamic values around human rights, we're calling for equal value. I know some people are going to have a problem with the word equal value of all human beings, irrespective of their roles, social ideas, their roles, their characteristics and behaviors that we attach to gender. As I said before, colleagues, it matters because 8 out of 10 people profess to a religion. In other words, faith does matter. Faith will always be a key cornerstone to tackling and unraveling some of the key challenges that we face in society, but faith will not be the only. It will be understanding the intersectional layers. It will be understanding root causes. It will be understanding about the research that we do. It will be also understanding about the advocacy work we'll do, because all these hand in hand together can change communities. Sometimes it takes an individual, but other times it will take an organization, and other times it will take communities. If we don't speak about gender-based violence as the biggest, largest Muslim relief organization that is out there, then you may think we may not be the people, but actually we should be those people. We should be challenging the narrative that is out there. Gender justice to anyone is a basic human right that is enshrined in Islam. And yet these injustices happen, and they happen in all societies. But particularly what we want to challenge within Islamic belief is when it happens in Muslim societies. We want to negate the narrative around Muslimness and gender-based violence. Anytime you're on a platform at a conference with other secular organizations, they associate Islam with violence. And we are standing there and saying, actually, Islam is not violent. But they're saying, prove it to us. So every platform, I don't know, Wasim, you've been on it, Najah, you've been on it, I've been on it, Iman, and there's colleagues in the room that who have to do that. But it is those harmful practices that we have to challenge. And the other thing is the Islamic texts and the interpretations are believed to legitimize these inequalities and inequities. So when you talk about FGM, type 1 FGM is known as the Sunnah. So negating that argument within the Islamic text. The global Muslim community has gone to a point where we're talking about upholding dignity, promoting justice, both in terms of equality and equity, and balancing the rights and responsibilities, all of which are central to the Islamic faith. Islam is misrepresented to justify the indignity, injustice, and abuse that women experience around the world on a daily basis. And again, as Najah said, it's not just women, it's everyone. So why now? We're asking, it's time that we lift generations out of poverty because, and I know many of you have heard me say this, whilst we talk about humanitarian crisis, providing a food box in a humanitarian setting is not the only thing that is going to work. Providing a hygiene pack with several sanitary towels is not going to work. We need to have more inclusive programming, more understanding of where and what participatory methods that we can use for people to be participating in what goes into my food pack, what goes into my hygiene pack. And one of the other things is standing up firmly for justice is one of the greatest injustices of our time. And finally, I just wanted to say, although the work that we're doing on the declaration we've started the work as Islamic Relief, we've initiated it, the intended result is a co-owned document that is partnership driven. So all the way from 2017, we've been working with UNFPA, UN Women, we've been working with, for example, organizations like Muslim Aid, Human Appeal, Muslim Hands. We've been working with a lot of civil society organizations, Muslim women's organizations. We've worked with MCB. We've worked with Islamic scholars, both male and female, to tackle some of the driven initiatives that come out of this humanitarian response to gender injustice. One of the things I want to also say is that working in silos is critical to the universal message of the declaration, and the success of it calls for that. So what is this declaration? Ultimately, it's an absolute reminder of our duty to protect and serve the most vulnerable and marginalized in our societies, but not just the most vulnerable. It is protecting all people. So when you have a layer of, for example, and I'm going to talk about this, about leadership roles, why women in the organization are not in leadership roles, we have to challenge that narrative why they are not in leadership roles. It's not just about tackling the violent aspect of it. It's about understanding why women, particularly, okay, so what is happening within the Islamic Relief family? Why is there that gap within the organization? Do you think that the gap can be served better when women come at it from their lens to be able to create some of the programming work around gender-based violence? So these are the kind of bigger questions that we have to ask. So therefore, I mean, what we're doing is therefore committed to ending suffering by supporting those affected by poverty and socioeconomic inequalities, those without access to education and fair employment, and those whose worlds have been turned upside down by natural disasters. And that's something that we don't often talk about. We go in and deliver aid, but in actuality, what does that woman want? How does she participate in that conversation? How is she, like in Indonesia, you know, so many people have been affected. Have women participated in what comes in their packets and what, you know, they want as part of humanitarian aid? So for me, particularly, the declaration is going to be serving that. We have a guest speaker today, and I'm not going to go on to the video, but Iman used to work for Islamic Relief and still is very much at the heart of Islamic Relief worldwide. And she's working on a project with the University of Birmingham at the moment. You're doing your PhD, Iman, with Birmingham University of Birmingham on sexual and gender-based violence versus religion. So we welcome Iman. Yeah.
Right, so how many of you can stay here longer? Because I think you have overrun this brown bag.
Yeah, but they've got sponsors there.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you are bribed, basically. Okay, no worries. So you know me, and I'm really pleased to see some familiar faces in the room. I will not take much of your time. I'm just basically here to talk about sexual gender-based violence in the refugee journeys. This is part of the project I belong to. So this is done by University of Birmingham, Uppsala University in Sweden, Bilken University in Ankara, and Melbourne University in Australia. And within this project, I found my niche. Based on my experience in Islamic Relief, I've declared I'm gonna work on exploring how religion influences the SGBV experiences of refugees. And yeah, my supervisors agreed and all that. And why I think why I want to do it, it's because based on the experience that I had here, and yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm really pleased to see that Islamic Relief is continuing the work on gender justice and gender-based violence. But one thing that is missing in the entire sector is the evidence that the faith approaches are actually working and are effective. There's very little evidence that this works, and therefore there is little funding to support these initiatives. And also there is lots of work done on prevention, so I've been humbled to be part of this movement to galvanize our efforts to prevent violence from faith perspective, as we, as part of the faith actors, as an FBO, we do prevent violence through these initiatives that my colleagues have outlined before, but we do, unfortunately, very little to respond to violence. And my inquiry is, looking at survivors' experiences from spiritual perspective. We know that SGBV has long-term consequences in all different areas of human well-being, like material, okay, obviously physical consequences, injuries, bruises, broken bones, emotional. Around 70% of survivors have trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder. And there are other consequences like material, of course, decreased productivity by the survivors, and in all different spheres like spiritual, which it also has meaning, but has very little attention. And people think, actually, violence against women and girls has no spiritual consequences. Yes, survivors, this is very private matter. Let them pray, or let them worship and follow their religious practices. But there is no inquiry looking into what happens in spiritual realm to survivors when they go through horrific experiences of violence. Well, my work that I've been doing, I just completed literature review and designing conceptual framework, is based on those concepts of intersectionality, where I begin from recognizing that religion is one of the intersectional factors that influences people's experience of SGBV. And this leads me to unpacking different layers of what actually contributes to people's vulnerability to violence. So religious identity, like for example, of refugee women, Muslim women who are visibly Muslim because of their headscarf, often, of course, they experience Muslim hatred when they arrive to Europe, and Islamophobia has an impact on their well-being, and it can perpetuate violence against them, even re-traumatize them. I'm looking at the concept of resilience, so there's a lot of concepts around religious coping, faith resilience, and all different ways how religion helps people to continue, to survive, to cope, to heal, to recover from whatever they went through. There is huge evidence that terminally ill people who are practicing their religious beliefs, and regardless of the religion, there is lots of evidence on Christianity, quite much less evidence on Islam. But these people are better off. Their well-being is better when they are spiritually involved during the illness. And there is a lot of literature around survivors, but not refugee survivors, who deploy religion as the coping mechanism. So this is the inherent coping mechanism. Reading the Quran or the Bible, referring to the Quranic or biblical characters is one way of helping survivors to continue and just recover from what they went through. There are other methods, of course, the faith communities support survivors, and all the different instruments that are even in Islam, like zakat and other means, also should support survivors, but do they do that? There is no evidence if actually this is happening. So I'm looking at faith-based responses as well, and I've discovered that everything is in the HGBV sector in humanitarian work is religion blind. So we were obsessed before to talk about, yeah, we need to be gender sensitive, and we were all thinking, oh yeah, gender blind, but what is actually becoming more apparent that the system that we are in, humanitarian system that we are in, is religious insensitive and it's religion blind, meaning that there is no much space for religious experiences of people, and the needs that they have, the religious needs, are not acknowledged. And all the GBV guidelines and so on that we have been using, they are also religion blind. They don't recognize religion as a resource for people to help to recover. The religion is always, as was mentioned, stigmatized as the negative, as a contributor to violence, but it's not recognized as a resource to recover or protect people from violence. Okay, so in my initial literature review, well, completed literature review, these are the initial findings that I'll be verifying further. So first of all, religion travels with refugees across borders. This is something that everyone is a private matter, but it's, again, not that much recognized, that something that people hold on is religion. They either spirituality or faith or religion, we can call it whatever you want to, but it is about people's personal beliefs in the transcendent. And these beliefs and practices do have influence on people's experiences, whatever they go through. And in my case, I'm looking at SGBV experiences. I've noted that religious identity can expose people to violence, can increase the exposure, but it also can protect or undermine their recovery. So it's of course a double sword edge. It has pros and cons. I hope to focus more on the positives, but I can't do that. I can't underestimate the intersectional factors of religious influences on the vulnerability at the same time. So I'm looking at both. Another finding, someone changed my presentation a bit, but all right, no problem. Other findings, yes, the humanitarian sector, the faith responses in humanitarian sector are existing, but they're mainly for prevention, very little for response. And in overall, everything is quite religion blind, so there is no much space to recognize actually people's spiritual dimension of the struggle, of the pain. It is only recognized as physical pain or material pain. Okay, so on this basis, I decided to look at that. First of all, I hope to understand the influences of religion on LGBT experiences of refugee women in the refugee journey. That's the overall aim, and I will be looking at how religion shapes vulnerability to violence and how it helps build resilience to recover from LGBT, to recover, to cope in everyday lives. In addition, of course, in addition to all the existing distal and daily stressors that refugees experience. Because HGBV actually was not, even though it happens, and maybe it was still here. No, it was changed. Around one in 5 refugees experience violence, in addition to the statistics to 1 to 3. And around 29% of migrant males experience violence when they since the arrival to Europe, compared to 69% of females who experience violence from the time of arrival to Europe. So this is a huge issue. But actually, gender-based violence is one thing. The distal stressors, the lack of housing, unemployment, lack of education, the hostility of the hosting community is considered as stronger, more negative than the rape, for example, rape experience or any other kind of a sexual gender-based violence experience itself. So the conditions that people are in are having a greater impact on people's well-being than the traumatic experiences that they are bringing in or they experience as they arrive here. All right, I will not bore you too much. This is just a summary of my literature review. So yes, HDBV is at the intersection of gender, displacement, and religion. Religion as one, religious identity, so it's associated Islamophobia to religious identity, and then 2, religious patriarchal interpretations, and yeah, I will just end that, yeah, patriarchy in overall. Okay, and I think I can thank you and ask you for questions if you have any. Yeah, I could talk much longer, but I think I will save it for you next time, as you are anyway overdue. So thanks for having me.
And you stay here, please, Iman. Okay. First of all, thank you very much. Sister Iman came, and mashallah, I think I remember when we were working on gender justice policy, and Sister Iman moved in IPD. Just keep it, please. Okay. So we were discussing that, like it's a giant task, all the consultation, developing the policy, and really moving forward. But I think that was the foundation that organization laid at that time, I must say. It was a different PPA grant that we were working. It's a funding from British government, and it really paved the way where we are. And we still are at infancy stage, I must say. There's a lot to do, but I think you are, mashallah, one of the member of the team who laid this foundation. So thank you very much. And I'm really glad to see the project doing. I hope you bring this research back and really benefit our program as well.
I hope so.
Hope so, inshallah. Yeah. So I would like to present a nice card to our sister Iman on behalf of all the staff members. And you will keep it.
Is it my goodbye card? Is it?
It's not a goodbye card.
It's a hello.
It's a hello.
Hello card.
So please join me and to congratulate Iman for the great work she is been doing and still doing with Islam Relief, I must say. Because when Sister Iman took this course, I said that, you know, you started a journey, you will stay with Islam Relief journey, and I'm glad to see her. It was a very pleasant surprise. And I said that, you know, like every year probably we need to get sign, Iman, that you come and talk about when we're having the activism.
I inherited that task.
You inherited this.
I still bug Iman.
Yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's the end for now. So please help yourself to samosas with tissue. We
With
didn't
tissue.
with tissue, sorry.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
We don't want to invest in plates. Yeah, oh yeah, and so there's placards as well. Guys, can you okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Wow, yes.